Justin Brannan is a city council finance chairman who just helped negotiate the City of Yes housing plan. But before we talk about that, I want to talk to you about congestion pricing, because on Friday, the federal government cleared the city's plan, the MTA's plan. It was the final hurdle. So I guess I know there's still going to be protests, but what's your take on whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to do congestion pricing?
Thank you, Marcia. I don't think ever writing the MTA a blank check is a good idea. And I think for neighborhoods like mine and Southeast Queens and the Northern Bronx and Staten Island, where we don't have a lot of transit options and we're so-called transit deserts, we're going to be taxed and punished even though we have no other option of how to get into Manhattan. I also think that congestion pricing, the argument before the pandemic, was an interesting one. I think as we're still trying to entice people to come back and work in Manhattan, I don't know if this is the best time to be implementing congestion pricing. I'd love to see some of these investments made before we get the bill, right? And, I think taxpayers are tired of getting the bill before they eat the meal. But for folks who live in transit deserts who are going to have to start paying this tax on day one, they have no other option for how to get around. And I think it's tough, and there's no other way around it.
I guess the question also becomes, if you don't have congestion pricing, how do you pay for the upgrades that the 120-year-old subway system really needs?
Sure. I mean, absolutely, right? It's, $15 billion in capital improvements that we desperately need. But it's also just from decades and decades of mismanagement of the MTA that now it's come down to, okay, now we have to just tax people to make up the cost. And it's just not ideal. So I'm happy to hear that the governor has brought the price down. But I just worry about folks who have no other choice but to drive because they have no other option, who are going to have to pay this tax.
Do you think there's going to be a political price to pay for the governor having implemented congestion pricing and having to run for re-election in 2 years?
I don't think anyone voted for Democrats because she paused congestion pricing before the election. That's just not a thing. So it was puzzling as to why it was paused at the 11th hour. And now sort of trying to reanimate it before Trump gets into the White House because everyone assumes Trump is now going to try to kill it. It just gives taxpayers whiplash, and just no one likes that.
See, there's a part of me that thinks that maybe the Republicans want congestion pricing to go through because they want to use it to run against her when she runs for re-election, on the hope that they could somehow become, take the State House in Albany.
It's possible. Look, Republicans, I think, have one of the easiest jobs in the world, and for now, because they get to point at stuff and say, this is broken, this is bad, and no one expects them to actually fix it. Now they're actually going to have the ball in all branches of government, and let's see if things get better. I don't think they will.
Is there a last gasp for the opponents of congestion pricing to get a stay?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I've read stuff about different judges and stuff taking a look at it, but I'm not sure.
Oh, wait, let's talk about the City of Yes. It's a landmark attempt to build housing in a city that desperately needs it. We have a 1.4 vacancy rate. Yep. We need new housing. Is this going to do all we expect it to do? I
think it's a huge step in the right direction. We haven't seen a zoning change of this type since the 1960s in the city of New York. And I think City of Yes, in the end, on what we're going to vote on next month, is going to be a good plan that's going to allow for about 80,000 new units of housing across all 5 boroughs, across every community. And I think the plan that the council put into effect, the City for All, also includes investments in infrastructure, in affordability, in home ownership. And it also takes, it also respects community context, right? People don't want to see a skyscraper built next to a row house. And I think we have to also get away from some of the misinformation that's been out there, that people think that we're going to, ban 1- and 2-family homes, or the bulldozers are coming for your little house. That's never the plan, right? It was just about building a little bit more housing in each neighborhood. And I think that will accomplish this.
What about the argument over parking? Right now, before it goes into effect, there are requirements that if you're building a building, you have to make allowances for parking spaces. That's going to change. Tell me about the 3-tiered system.
So the 3 tiers are basically, it's all about how far away you are from transit, which makes a lot of sense, right? The closer you are to transit, if I live above the subway station, I don't need a car to get around because the subway's there. Hopefully it's a reliable line. But the idea, though, is also to let the market decide a bit. So if I'm building with City of Yes, or even right now, if I'm building a new development in an area where there's no transit, if I want to get a return on my investment as a developer, I'm probably going to offer parking whether or not the city says I have to or not, because I want to rent or sell those units. So for me, it makes a lot of sense. If you're in a neighborhood where it's a transit desert and people have to drive to work and you're a developer, even if the city says you don't have to offer parking, you still might do it. So I think one thing that people have to understand with the City of Yes, this isn't mandating anything. We're not saying you have to go build housing.
But it is changing the zoning.
Absolutely, which is great because it's been way too onerous for way too long. But I think the market will still decide in a lot of these cases, which is what we want.
But also there's another question about whether you can build on one family units, whether you can build an in-law apartment or you can build something in your backyard. Tell me about that and how that will increase the housing stock.
So it's these ADUs. So basically, folks who have basement apartments, it's trying to bring basement apartments and houses like that or units like that up to code, basically. A lot of it is already happening now, but it's not legal. So we're trying to make it easier for folks who might want to do that as, for extra income, whatever it may be. There's concern around that. Obviously, a lot of it is because of the hypothetical. And a lot of this, I think, because you want to get that number of possible units built or units enabled, I think there's a lot of fear around the specter of what's possible. It doesn't mean that everyone is actually going to take advantage of what's there.
But also, we're worried about basement apartments in general in flood zone areas.
So flood zone areas will be completely immune from this. So if you're in a flood zone area, you're going to have special protections because we don't want to put anyone in harm's way. Certainly, we saw what happened in Queens a couple of years ago. No one wants that again. So this is about making sure you're doing it smart and you're doing it safe.
But see, we have to talk about the idea of affordability.
Sure. And
what's affordable. And a lot of people say that an apartment that costs more than, like, say, $2,000 or $2,500 a month is out of the reach of so many people. Now, I know you changed the income levels about what's affordable, but still, are we going to have enough apartments so that people who need them, who aren't, highly paid, are still going to be able to find a place to live in New York City?
Right. It's a great question. I mean, the zoning changes on their own do nothing for affordability, right? A zoning change does nothing there. Making sure that folks are taking advantage of the new 421A, and making sure that there is money there allocated for affordability is important because we have to build housing at all income levels, not just low income. It's got to be market rate down to low income, all levels. But obviously, people are getting squeezed out of the city, and the priority needs to be creating housing that people can afford. You talk a lot about who's leaving the city. Rich people are not fleeing the city. Working families are fleeing the city because housing is too damn expensive.
But what's the level? I mean, we have about 30 seconds left. What's the level that you would like to see as the median cost of an apartment so that people can build things that people who can't afford can still.
Well, I think the AMI indicator is helpful, so you get an idea of what the area median income is. But my thing is that if the people who build the housing cannot afford to live in it once it's built, then it's too expensive.
So do you have any sense of how many of these 80,000 apartments would qualify for affordability?
I don't have an exact number, but we're trying to make as many of them as possible.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we'll be right back. We are here with New York City Councilman and candidate for controller, Justin Brannan. So I want to talk to you about what's just happened in terms of the election and the fact that it seems like there's a more conservative bent among New York voters in general. I mean, Donald Trump got 43% of the vote in what supposedly blew York. And I wonder if that will change how people regard the next series of elections, the mayor election, the city council elections, the controller's election, and the public advocate's elections.
Sure, it's a great question. I think, for those of us who live in, so-called purple districts, and for someone like me who's had to fight like hell to win every general election, this wasn't so shocking for us that this red wave rolled over New York. But I think this is really a return to the bread and butter issues, right? I think that the problem we had as Democrats is that we didn't have a really clear message on the economy. Donald Trump offered people a scapegoat, right? People were complaining about my eggs and my milk are too expensive, and explaining the economy and inflation is hard. And when things are hard to explain, people want someone to blame. Donald Trump said, blame the migrants. Your milk is too expensive, the migrants. We all know that that was not why your groceries are too expensive. But for the average person, it was better than nothing. It was better than having no answer. And I think that the economy is ultimately going to be what drives people, because that's their day-to-day life and what affects their family.
So how does that affect the next elections next year? How does it affect you when you run for controller, for example? How does it affect the other candidates?
So, I mean, I'm running for controller because specifically for that reason, that I want to make life easier for working families. And I feel that the $115 billion city budget is the biggest tool we've got to make life more livable and more affordable for these families that are fleeing New York.
But you have a bird's eye view of the city budget. You're the finance chairman of the city council. So how would you change it? I mean, are we wasting money? Are we spending it wisely? Are we not spending it wisely?
I don't think our priorities are I don't think we're putting our money where our mouth is. I think the city budget is our value statement, and I don't think that we're putting money where most New Yorkers want it to go.
Where should it go?
For instance, we just saw a budget modification done where the budget now is almost $3 billion more than what it was back in June.
Right.
Most of the money went to more cops, cops that never needed, the cadet classes that never needed to be cut in the first place. Meanwhile, the parks are literally burning to the ground, and not a dime was given to the Parks Department. So I think we need to reorganize our priorities, and I really do believe that budget is the best tool we've got to make life more affordable for working families.
So what would you cut and where would you add?
I would definitely you got to prioritize the programs that aim at making life more affordable. You want to talk about universal child care, after school. That makes life easier for working families. You want to talk about early childhood education. Anything that's going to make life easier for working families is going to benefit everyone around the bowl. You talk about making sure retirees' pensions are growing and safe and safeguarded, making sure you're investing in our parks and our playgrounds and our schools. These are the things that people want to see a city investing in. And with a $115 billion budget, we're not broke. The economy is strong. Tourism is back. We're seeing, tax revenue is back. We need to just be investing in what people care about.
So do you have to cut anything to do all these things?
I don't think we have to cut anything. I just think we need to be smart about where we're prioritizing money. And right now, I think it's very lopsided, where you saw almost $150 million going towards the police and $0 going to the Parks Department. It just doesn't make sense. And in a $115 billion budget, you don't have to make those tough decisions. There's enough money to do all of it.
But people want public safety.
Absolutely, but public safety is not just the police. Public safety is having more resources in more communities. You often hear people say that neighborhoods with the most cops are not always the most safe. Neighborhoods with the most resources, with the best schools, with the best parks, with the best playgrounds, all that costs money too.
Well, but Donald Trump got a lot of publicity when he named a government efficiency committee headed by Elon Musk and Raman Banswamy. But here's the question: should something like that exist in New York City? Should there be a committee on government efficiency to take a look at whether we're getting the best bang for the buck, whether we're actually putting money where it should be put, and are there ways to save money?
I think that office exists, and it's the controller's office. That's your job. That is your job, is to make sure that money is going to the right place, and to say and call it out when it's not, and to do audits in agencies, not just fiscal audits, but managerial audits, to make sure that these agencies are working, not that they're not redundant. Let me see the flow charts of these agencies. The bureaucracy and the redundancy is insane. Some of these agencies right now are so skeletal on the staff level that it's no wonder that these agencies are struggling.
So how would you, Justin Brannan, as controller, be different from the present controller?
Look, I think Brad's doing a great job. I think I would certainly dig down. I think the audits he's done on NYCHA have been fantastic. I'd like to audit HPD because I think it takes too long to process paperwork. You could build something in this city quicker than you could process paperwork at HPD. It's insane. The DOE, which I used to work at the DOE, tons of bloat and bureaucracy there. That money is not getting to the classrooms. There's tons of money at the DOE. Somehow it doesn't make it to the pencils in the classroom.
How do you do that? How do you change that?
You audit it to see where that money is actually going. When the money comes in, what happens? How come it's not reaching my kid's classroom? And that's one of the biggest powers of the controller's office.
So taking a look at the fact that we have not only a controller's race, but we have a mayor's race. Do you see Eric Adams running for re-election?
As of today, it seems like he's going to. I'm assuming, so long as, he's not forced to resign for some reason, he's going to run for re-election.
Assess his chances.
I think it's going to be tough. I think you're going to see a really robust primary. I think, look, the first time the mayor got elected, it was still during COVID. So a lot of the campaign was still done on Zoom. This is going to be a real robust campaign with, the press corps chasing everyone around the city. I'm sure you'll be there.
Yeah, I
do. But I think people need that right now. I think, look, after Trump winning, New Yorkers are going to want a real robust debate around who's the next mayor.
But the question then still becomes, how does a Trump victory and the fact that there seems to be a more conservative bent affect the race? Because so far, most of the people who said they want to run are to the left. So the mayor still has a lane because he ran as a moderate the last time and he won by defeating all the people who ran to the left. Right. And how does that affect the race, and how does it affect city council races?
I don't necessarily see it as a conservative bent. I see it as the people that I believe voted for Trump believe because Trump was talking to the issues that matter to them. Whether or not he sold them on a con, which I think he did, is another story. But he was talking to the issues, the bread and butter, kitchen table issues. To me, we're looking for a return to that. And when you get a return to that, it's talking about making life more affordable. If a candidate can talk about how you're going to make life easier for working people, you're going to win elections no matter what. And I think that's what we're looking at a return to.
Will we still see a more progressive city council after the next set of elections?
I think so, because look, you also have to understand too that, pushing for things like, affordable housing or universal child care or universal health care, these aren't radical things. I mean, usually these are the progressive candidates that talk about this stuff, but I don't think any of these things are actually radical in any way.
So speaking about the migrants, are we at all worried in New York about what could happen if Donald Trump goes through with his plan to deport?
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of folks are, horrified, who are worried. They remember what happened last time, and they're hoping that a lot of the stuff he threatened or promised to do that he won't be able to accomplish. But people are very, very scared, and that's very, very real, right? It's not just the political fallout from, oh my God, what do Democrats do? But it's actually what do New Yorkers do that are worried about this? Undocumented people, what's going to happen to them? So this is a real impact in a significant way.
But it's also not just the recent people who've come here seeking asylum. It's also people who've lived here for a while that still haven't gotten their green cards, but are well entrenched in our society.
Absolutely. Taxpaying.
By the way, I was going to say that, a big part of our economic base, because they work, they pay taxes.
Absolutely.
They send
the things that Trump has promised that would somehow fix the economy, tariffs, mass deportation, it would absolutely do the opposite. I'm hoping that he doesn't get a chance to actually do these things before people see it's too late. He's actually going to make things worse if he tries to do this stuff.
So we have a new police commissioner designate who takes office on Monday.
Yep.
How do we feel about that?
I think Jessie's great. I think she's super responsive. I've worked closely with her as sanitation commissioner. Look, I think this time certainly calls for someone who's incorruptible, and I think Jessie is incorruptible. I think above all, you need someone there who's going to be independent. And look, I think it's tough. Any of these agencies, the police department, fire department, sanitation department, it's hard when you bring an outsider in to lead the department. Usually it's someone who's worked their way up inside the agency. But look, Jessie did work at the police department for, I think, 12 years. So she's been there. She knows the story. She's got a lot of people vouching for her who I think people take seriously, and I look forward to seeing what she does.
What happened? So, the mayor did decide to hire another 1,600 police officers. Do you think that was in response to the fact that there's been a lot of people who've retired, or is it just that we think we have a public safety issue because of these high-profile things and we want people to feel more safe? I
think he was always planning on doing this. I mean, I came on your show about a year ago.
You did, and predicted it.
Yeah, I came on your show a year ago as Budget Nostradamus and predicted this, that once the mayor saw that the migrant crisis was not going to bankrupt or destroy the city, that he would actually refund those cadet classes, and that's exactly what he's doing. It just comes down to, look, we were trying to get Washington to pay attention. The mayor threw a Hail Mary pass saying, look, I'm going to fire police officers unless you give me money to help the migrants. That was never necessary in the first place. place. And now that we see it wasn't necessary, he's putting the money back into the cadet classes. That's all it is.
But it doesn't bring the police department up to its full strength of 35,000. Do we need that 35,000? Or, I mean,
I think it brings us close. I mean,
34.
Yeah, I think it brings us to about 34,000. I think there's attrition too. I think we need to attract people to work for the greatest city in the world again, not just in the police department, but at HPD, at the Parks Department. All these agencies have tons of vacancies, and I think we need to make it attractive for folks to want to live here and work here, but it all goes back to making it more affordable here as well, because you got a lot of cops who are working 2 extra jobs at the same time, so wages need to come up.
But here's the question. Why is it so difficult to recruit people? And you were right, obviously, you know, because you're the finance chairman. But there are so many agencies with so many vacancies.
Yeah, it's insane.
Why is it so difficult, since New York City does offer retirement benefits, health benefits? Yeah. I mean, it's a good employer. So why do people not want to work for the city of New York?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think some of the wages need to come up. I think the remote work is an issue, obviously. But I also think that the Office of Management and Budget is really slow rolling some of these hirings, right? You have the Parks Department now that's down almost 1,000 staffers. So they might say that the hiring freeze has been lifted, but if it takes 7 months to onboard someone to a job, that's basically a hiring freeze. But they do this to save money. So they say, well, you know, we can't fill those jobs, so we're just going to cut, you know, we're going to use this money for something else, when they're not aggressively trying to attract people.
But yet the thing about it is that these are really needed jobs.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are people who, you know, work in housing, who work with migrant services, who deal with you know, child problems, ACS, and they're not being hired.
100%. I mean, I see it, like I said before, I see it in HPD, where the folks who are on the ground, the folks who are processing the paperwork, we need to hire these staffers because they're the ones that ultimately, you know, get the gears moving, and these agencies are skeletal.
So do you think we're overtaxing people, and that's why people are thinking of moving out of New York City and New York State?
No, I don't think we're overtaxing people. I think people don't feel that their tax dollars are actually working for them. I think people feel that they're paying tons in taxes and they're not seeing a return on their investment. And I think that's why people are feeling squeezed.
So I want to ask you some lighter questions.
Sure.
So I want to know, did you dress for Halloween?
I dressed up as a local politician. I just put on a little sign that said local politician. Yeah.
And people believed you?
Yeah, they believed it. I'm very, I mean, come on.
Go no. Thanksgiving's around the corner. What do you think? Turkey or sides? I'm sorry, tofurkey or
Tofurkey, yeah, I'm a vegetarian. Tofurkey.
Tofurkey.
Yeah, yeah.
So is it true that, because I know you're a vegetarian, that you have a meat is murder tattoo?
On the back of my neck.
You really do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And why did you give up meat?
Back in probably 8th or 9th grade. It's been a long time. Just a love of animals. I just don't believe that we should eat animals.
Do you have pets?
Yeah, I have greyhounds.
You do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How many?
Well, I just one. One of them passed away. We rescued them from Florida. They're retired racing greyhounds.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, they're beautiful. I'll bring them on sometime.
Sure, no problem. So what are you looking forward to this Thanksgiving?
Just relaxing, at least for 24 hours. You know, it's been nonstop. Just sitting down with, you know, friends and just trying to take stock. And, you know, we might not have everything we want, but hopefully we have everything we need. And that's what Thanksgiving's all about.
You going to cook?
No, you don't want that. Let's send the fire department over there.
So you're a musician, which we all know. What have you got on your playlist?
What have I been listening to lately? This guy, Mick G, who was on Saturday Night Live recently, who I really liked him before he was on Saturday Night Live. Now I don't feel as cool because now the whole world knows about him, so I have to find someone else to listen to.
Anything else you'd like to say to your constituents before Thanksgiving?
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone out in Coney Island and Bay Ridge and Southern Brooklyn. I love you guys. I love serving you. I wish I didn't have to give up this job next year, but term limits are
But you might have another job.
Yeah, I might have another job, sure.
And on that note, thank you for joining me, and thank you at home for joining me as well.